thanking you, Father, for your faithfulness, thanking you for your love. We are here today because of you. And so I'm asking that you would give us your presence, come by your spirit into this place and teach us, show us better ways to live, better ways to love by giving us today what you want us to learn. This is my prayer. And if you're praying with me out there, brother and sister, and we believe, let's all say amen. Amen. We're focusing on flax seeds today. Now that might be hard to do because flax seed can be a tiny seed, like most seeds in nature, right? But the beautiful thing about these flax seeds is that they've been given to us by God as a way for us to achieve a specific health goal. Now, a lot of times when we're thinking about seeds, we only deal with them in terms of the fiber aspect to help us, again, be regular and healthy. Or we think about maybe the vitamin aspect of that nutrient that it can give to us. But we're going to focus on flaxseed today from the oil perspective. Yes, oil. Normally, when you're talking about oil, unfortunately, in conventional medicine, that's a bad thing. It's not good. And the reason why is because most oils that we use today, they're processed. They're created from other stuff that was not necessarily intended to be oil, even though it can be oil. And so how can we get on the positive side of oil? Well, flax seeds are one way to do just that. I have an unopened fresh bag of flax seeds here, but I also have a container of flax seeds that we have. Now, normally, like any seed, a flax seed comes as a whole thing, right? It's a whole case. And that whole casing has everything that the Lord intended for it to have, not only for it to perpetuate, but also for it to give life. When you're looking at a flax seed, it's very small. And so as a flax seed husk, it's difficult to deal with. And you really can't get a lot out of it without chewing it. So the flax seed that we're going to be talking about today is not whole flax seed, but ground or crushed flax seed. Let me grab a cutting board for you here so you can get a chance to see what an actual flax seed will look like. And I'm going to try and grab a light one so that you can catch the color, catch the contrast of what flaxseed or flaxseed mill, or what do they call that, powder might look like. This is it in our container. And when you're looking at a flaxseed, and when it's crushed like this, the difference is that it's the same seed or the same flax, but it's been ground up. Ideally, the very best thing to do when you're dealing with ground flaxseed is to freshly grind it. But most of us don't have a grinder. And even if you do have a grinder, flaxseed can be tough to deal with, even if you toss it into a blender, because it's considered a wet blend. See, the oil in the flaxseed is actually that moisture that's created inside of the seed. So when you go trying to blend that up on your own, you have to be mindful, use it right away, but also you have to be mindful that it may not deal with your blender correctly because of the oil in it, because it's wet. It's not dry like corn or an oat. So now with our flaxseed, as you can see here, it's very light. It's not dense, but here's the power of it. Inside of this flaxseed is not just oil, but the oil that our bodies and our brain needs to operate. We're talking about these omega family of oils. And it is tough to get these in, especially if you're living a plant-based or vegan lifestyle, because most people, when they're even talking about the good side of omega-3s, the primary source that they're thinking about is an animal source, most notably a salmon or pink salmon. But if you're vegan, but you still need that omega-3, there has to be a way, right? There has to be something that the creators made so that you can be consistent in that goal of trying to get as much as you can to the earth. And this is where the flaxseed comes in. Because it's ground up, it's easier to process, easier to digest, but it also has another cool feature that allows us to use it in our plant-based lifestyle. When you have a flaxseed ground or flaxseed milled like this, it can actually become an egg replacer. Now, normally when we say egg replacer, we're not going to talk about, in order to use it to make a scramble or using it to make a sunny side up egg. That's not going to quite work the same. That's where tofu comes in as a good substitute. But when we're talking about egg replacers, which is something you might be learning or you're very familiar with as a vegan or a vegetarian, you're talking about something that replaces eggs in terms of its activity in baking. See, eggs are a great binder because around that tiny embryo, that sac or that egg is filled with mucus, what we normally would call that egg yolk. Now, it's not necessarily just like the mucus that's inside of us, but it is basically the same thing for intents and purposes as to why we don't eat it if we're trying to go to a plant-based lifestyle. Bearing in mind also that one of the limitations with an egg is that that cholesterol and that fat in that egg or that oil, it's really not that good for us. So this is where flaxseed comes in. When you grind it up, there's a cool thing that flaxseed can do. I'm gonna move this out the way, and we're going to take our container here, and you can actually use it to replace the egg whites that you would normally put in your cakes or in your breads or anything that you're going to bake with for that egg white purpose. When you have the flax seed, you want to get 1 tablespoon, 1 tablespoon. Now, you don't have to really sweat whether or not it's completely flat, but you don't want a heaping one, just kind of a tablespoon like this. So I'm going to just knock it off here and even it out. And that's going to give us 1 tablespoon of ground flax seed. And in order to turn this into an egg white replacer, all you gotta do is add water. Can it get any easier than the thing plus water? Anything that you got to do that with, you're probably eating natural, and you're probably going to be smiling because it doesn't take a lot of brain work or hand work to make it happen. All I'm going to do now, for every 1 tablespoon of flaxseed, we're going to add 3 tablespoons of water. So I got 1 tablespoon in there. So we're going to add 1, 2, and 3. Now, you do want to give it a mix because you want to get all of that flaxseed moistened and you want it to set. Why do we want it to set? Because as it is setting, it's going to gel. Some people may say coagulate. Some people may say firm up. But basically what's going to happen through the glory of God's creation, this thing that was a seed is going to act like an egg binder. I mean, that's powerful when you think about it, just because you ground it up and put it with a little water. And so we're going to let that set. You can use that right away. You don't have to let that set. You can go ahead and add that to your cornbread mix. You can add that to your cake mix. But if you really want to get that thick consistency that you see in an egg, just let it set for about 2 to 5 minutes. You don't have to wait that long. I mean, I've waited sometimes as long as like 10, 15, 20 minutes because I forgot, egg replacer. And I go over there and grab it. 20 minutes later, it's just bound up nice and well, and it works just like an egg white. Now, remember we were talking about this as an oil. Let's dialogue about that while we're letting that settle a little bit. The brain is an amazing, amazing thing because the way that the Lord built our brains, it doesn't necessarily run off the other stuff that our bodies run off of. That's why when you look at these neurodegenerative diseases, particularly Alzheimer's, what they're finding in their research is that these brain deficiencies or these brain holes that are created, if you go in and zoom in deep, deep, deep into the brain is lacking the building tool on some level that helps it maintain or to achieve optimal health. And do you know what the brain really, really needs to reach that? Yes, it's good to have good food, good vitamin, good minerals, but it's really oil. It's good oil that the brain uses because those sheaths or those wires that are in our brain are actually coated. And the coating that is used or that's created by God, it really uses oil to create those coatings that protect those nerve endings, that protect the brain. So good oil is needed, not just for a good heart, not just for a good body, but even for a good brain. So let's think of this in terms of a brain food, right? And we're trying to get these good oils in because we may not getting them from animal sources. We're trying to go the plant-based or vegan route. Now, mind you, just using flaxseed for what it is, absolutely. While this is gelling up for us, I put flaxseed in pretty much any savory food that is not a fruit or a vegetable. Okay, so think about it this way. Let's say I'm having breakfast. And let's say I'm about to go make some oatmeal, or I may be having my favorite cold cereal with some almond milk or with some brown rice milk. Guess what? That's a great opportunity to sneak in some of that good oil. So you grab a tablespoon, or if you're a beginner, grab a teaspoon, even half a teaspoon. Any amount is better than zero. But you grab a tablespoon of your flaxseed. I'm about to say omega-3s because that's really what I'm doing, right? You grab a tablespoon of this, drop that in your oatmeal. Grab a tablespoon of this, put that in that cold cereal, mix it up. And you're saying, well, wait a minute, Chris, you're showing me how to use this and make it an egg replacer. Isn't that going to thicken up my food? Here's the cool thing. By the time you actually eat whatever you put the egg replacer, whatever you put the flaxseed in, it's not going to be gelled up. So it probably is not going to take you 10 minutes to eat a little bowl of oatmeal or 20 minutes to eat a bowl of cereal. So you don't have to worry about that happening. But what you do get the benefit of is that it brings this real nice nutty flavor to everything that you may be eating it with. So now let's go in terms of baking, but not baking like as a replacer for eggs, but as terms of flavor and getting those omegas in. Let's say you add it into your cornbread. Now, I personally, you may see our cornbread recipe. I'll try and remember to put a link to that cornbread recipe on this video. But this is what we use as our egg binder in our cornbread. You never know the difference. Cornbread's not crumbling apart, and it's not as hard as a brick, but it has that same softness because of the added olive oil, and then this is the egg replacer. You still get that binding. All of the cookies that we make, all of the cakes that we make, we are careful to make sure we add in that flaxseed, one, to get the benefit of the omega-3, two, because it has this binding property, but three, it just tastes good. It adds a level or angle of flavor to the foods that you can get without having to put nuts in it or without having to put something much more hearty, and you got to lose a lot of it to get that same flavor. So we've been talking about this as a brain food, how you can use it in your savory food, if you're making breads, dishes, cakes, things like that. Not necessarily vegetables or fruits. It doesn't quite work the same. But anything else is pretty much open season. So you're adding it to your granola, adding it even to your rice. When you're making your rice dishes, you can dash some of that omega-3, some of those flax seeds ground up over it, and it gives a nice nutty flavor to the food. Now that this has had a chance to settle, I'm going to grab a plate because it's with the plate that you'll be able to see how this behaves just like an egg yolk. So let me grab a plate for you real quick. I'm going to grab a flat one out here. Oh, even better. Now, we got our flat plate here, right? So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to pour this on the plate. And now, remember what we went from. We went from this. You see how it can dance on there, right? So now we're going to go with 3 tablespoons of water to 1 tablespoon of flaxseed. Look at what has happened just in the 3 or 4 minutes that we've been talking about this. Now I'm going to try and do this slow motion. Haven't messed with it. Just been setting. I can mix it if I want to, but I'm just going to use it just straight as it is. So you can see. Look at how this behaves, just like an egg yolk. Look at that. Look at that. I hope you can see it. There we go. And now on a plate, look what happens. I'm going to turn the plate up and I'm going to try and let it drip down. But I want you to see the movement. I want you to see how there are no excuses. There is never not a way to go the way of health. It's all a matter of finding it. And we found it right here in a tablespoon of flaxseed. Look at this. Now watch how it turns on the plate there. Look at that. Oh, look at that. Tell me that's not like an egg yolk. This is amazing. And it doesn't require any little chickies to have to get ground up. What are you talking about, Chris? You know, the unfortunate reality is that when you're looking at a chicken egg or when you're looking at your regular store grocery chicken egg, none of the male chickens are kept around. Those are the roosters, right? They're just left to breed. But most of the chickens that you see, they're almost always going to be female because from those females, then you can get more eggs. But it is so heartbreaking to see the process of preparing these animals to be used to breed the eggs because eventually they're going to be used for food as in terms of being eaten themselves. But it's amazing to see how they have these massive industrial grinders. And what they normally will do, they'll separate the males from the female, the chicks. And all of these male chicks go to this grinder, or even they're just left out to perish on their own. And then the females are then taken and they start the process of producing eggs, and eventually they'll be used for meat. I didn't want to turn the corner to turn a fun time into a bad time, but I do want to share this with us so that you can feel empowered in your compassion, which I know is touched just by learning or even being reminded of this, that there are other ways to eat. We're not locked into this cage, or we're not locked into this lane where you've got to do this to get this. But the thing I have found just by making the decision to go plant-based because of the idea of not having to take something else's life for me to live, the added benefit on that decision is this great oil, these omega oils that build up the brain, that blesses the life. And so I want to encourage us, especially our seniors who may be watching this, and you've been living, perhaps using the eggs as your binder or not using good oils. This is definitely an alternative that you want to look to as a measure to prevent the onset of cognitive disease. And if you're a little bit younger, if you're, quote, no pun intended, you're a spring chicken, the sooner the better. Because by going to this option and minimizing or avoiding the eggs from the chickens, you're going to see a difference in your respiratory health. Because remember the thickness, that egg white that's causing those things to bind together, that binding doesn't necessarily break down when we eat it inside. It is still there, which causes a lot of respiratory disorders and dysfunctions. So just all the more reasons why to go this route. But I want to encourage you to let you know why you should make this move is because it's a better way. Oh, cool. Yeah, I've been seeing it. I see, Jean, I see you out there. Brother Jean, one of our students from school, or should I say former student. He's a graduate, 8th grader. He graduated a couple of weeks ago along with Faith, our middle daughter. And so good to see you, Brother John. And if any of the brothers and sisters are watching there with you, hello, family. We love you. And hopefully you're being encouraged by this because it's a blessing to see you there. And now, if you're watching this, folks, all you got to do, just like you would normally go to the grocery store and you would go by that egg aisle, try something a little bit different this week. Go by and get you a bag of ground flax seed. How much did this cost us? I think this might have cost us $2 and change. This is 1 pound. At most of the big box stores, they usually sell it by the pound or they sell it by 2 pounds. So I want you to think about this for a second. I used 1 tablespoon. 1 tablespoon gave me 1 egg. This is 1 pound. I don't have the time to process and do the math. Not only am I getting something good, I'm getting more of that good stuff. Because when you go buy a dozen eggs, how many eggs do you get? You only get 12. I think you got a little bit more than 12 tablespoons in this bag. And so that's the double, triple, I'm losing count of the blessings. That's like the quadruple blessing of going the plant-based route. Be encouraged because there's always another way. Grab a bag of this, give it a try, again, in your baked goods, or mix it up in your cereal, drop it in something that is savory, not a fruit or a vegetable, because it really doesn't taste that well, that good, in something like that. But something like that, the savory, try it in cereal, even throw it in some milk, whatever, get it in and get good. All right, everybody.